So today we want to look on functions in C. Now, functions are modules that are used in your code to break up your large problem into smaller segments. It uses the modular approach, and the modular approach is just as was stated before, where it is that you are going to segment the problem that you have and you are going to write your code based on the different parts. So, for example, you are writing a code which has a lot of input that you would need. You have one section which is going to do login. You have one section, you have to do login, you have to accept the data from the user. Then you have your processing that will take place and your output. Instead of you writing your full C code in main, what you can do is break it up. So you have a small section or one section that just focuses on input. You have one section which focuses on the login screen. You have one section which focuses on the output and whatever processing needs to take place. Now, what this does, it helps you in terms of identifying errors. That's one of the benefits. So instead of you searching through a code which has multiple lines or thousands of lines, what you would do is that you can go to one section and adjust whatever it is that you want to adjust if it is that you're updating, or correct an error if that is the case. Now for your C function, you can write what we call function prototypes, or you can write your full function. Now, a prototype is basically just your function name and the parameter list without any definition. The full function aspect and the parameter would come above int main. So if you're writing your function parameter, that would be above int main, and then the body of that function would be below int main. So what will happen is that sometimes we know the functions that we want to utilize in our C code, and instead of um thinking or fleshing it out in the moment, what we do, we just list it at the top, or some persons just want to have the layout of their C code looking a little bit different, where it is that you're not seeing the body of the functions at the top before it is that you reach the int main. And we'll give a more visual look for that later on. So a function, once you're writing a function in C, you'd have to declare your function. Now the data type for your function should match whatever value you're returning. So like on the screen now, we're seeing int main and we have return 0. It's returning 0, which is an integer, and main now is int. So it's the same thing. If it is that you have a function and it's going to return a decimal value, then you know that will be a double or that will be a float. If you want it to return a character, then the data type for your function is going to be char. If you want it to return an integer, then you are going to declare it as int. So let's write a function which would find the maximum or the larger of two values. So we have two ways by which, as I said, we're going to write this. So we're going to first look on putting the function body and name above main, and then we're going to look on writing the prototype and writing the function body below main. So at this point now, what we would do is that we would declare the data type for the function. If it is that you know that the user is going to enter decimal values, then at this point, then you would have double. If you want the user to enter integers, then you would write integer. So I'm going to go with int max. And here now we're going to put what we call our parameter. So in here, we're going to look on the main values that we're going to pass through this function. And I'm going to find the larger of two values. I'm just going to do with the data type. So it's int num1, comma, int num2. Now we can't do int num1, comma, num2. That is going to give you an error message in terms of the parameters. Now, if it is that you write in the body of the function, then you move into your parentheses at this point, right? So just to go back over in terms of what we have here, we have the data type for our function, which is int. We have the name of our function, which is max. We have the parameters, or in terms of the values that we're passing through this function, and that is int, num1, and num2. Let me change the language here so that I can, right. So here now, we're going to define our function. In terms of definition now, we're stating what the function should do. So here, I'm going to have int result, right? And in here now, I am going to ascertain how it is that we're going to identify if num1 is greater than num2, and we use the if function for that. So if, I know there's some errors there that we'll address shortly. So if num1 is greater than num2, we know we don't use the word then, I will always indent, then result would be equal to num1. Now, because we're passing this through main, we're going to pass this through main later on. We're utilizing result here. Now we could basically output that num1 is greater than num2 as the output here, but this is just one way that we're doing it, right? So in essence now, we could have the results here in parentheses, but because we only have one command, we're just going to leave it. So else, indent again. We don't need to write the if statement again because we only have two values here. If we had three values, then we'd need to compare next set of values. So if num1 is not greater than num2, then obviously num2 is greater. So result is now equal to num2. So here now what we want to do is that we want to return result. What is wrong with this spelling? So I want to return result, semicolon here. Now semicolon is supposed to be here, so let me add this. All right, so let's go back through just for emphasis. So we're writing function or the function body, right? This function, we're going to call it later on in main. So this is not going to do anything by itself. It's going to be called in main where it is that when we say call, it means that we're going to enforce it. We're going to utilize it. So we have the data type and the data type must match whatever it is that you're returning. Now, at this point, kindly note that if you are not returning a value, instead of using a data type here, what you would use is the word void. They'd have void max if it is that you're not returning a value at all. And you can have functions that's not returning anything. So int max, integer, int is the data type for the name for the function, sorry. The name of our function is max. This function, we have two parameters, two main parameters that we're passing through it. And that's num1 and num2. Please remember that we always use variable names that are meaningful and represent the data that it is holding. Now, after we have the name And after it is that we do the parameters, right? We move into the body of our function. And the body of our function is enclosed between parentheses, and that's your start and your stop, basically. Now, within this, I created one variable, which is just local to the function itself, and that is result. Then I'm going to compare the two values that I have in my parameter right here to see which one is greater. I store whichever one is greater based on the condition in the variable result, and I return that result to the function. Now, after you have done that, you want to implement the function in main. On in main and how it is that we utilize the function. So the first thing we need to do is that we need to identify how many variables we have in the function, and then we're going to create variables that will replicate those. So in the function max, we have three variables, so we're going to declare those. So we have int n1, so that's going to take the place of num1, n2, that will take the place of num2, and r will take the place of result. Now here, we want to prompt the user to enter two values, and we use the printf function there. So here we're going to just ask the user to enter an integer value, right? There's a / n. Now guys, if it come up blue, it means that it is correct, because sometimes I have an issue with the forward and the back. So it is supposed to turn blue. That's a key there. Semicolon, scan F. Now we're reading our values. So the first part is where we have the data type to match the value that we are accepting. We're accepting integers, so that would be D, that's our specifier. Ampersand sign, and the variable that we want to store it in. So that's n1, semicolon. Now this is going to be the same thing, so I'm just going to copy this and paste it. Indent always. So we're going to ask the user to enter another integer, and this now we're going to store in num2. Now we have the values, now we need to compare. So what we're going to do is that we are going to call the function. So what we are going to do here is going to have our local variable, which is going to take the place of result. So r takes the place of result. So r is now equal to the name of the function, which is max, open bracket here, and the values that we're passing through it. So that is n1, because n1 is taking the place of num1, and n2 because n2 is taking the place of num2. All right, so now what we need to do is to output which value is the larger of the two. So printf the larger of the two values is our specifier, because the value comes here, so that's percentage d, followed by our variable side here, which is going to be result, semicolon. Should have a return 0 already. So now let's run to see if this have any errors here. No, we don't. So let's enter an integer value. So we're going to run this twice, which is that the first value is larger and the next one where the second value is larger. So enter a variable. So let's enter 67 and then enter 34. So the larger of the two is 67. Let's run that again. So let's do 34 and now 67. And now the larger value is 67. So we see where it is that this code words. So I hope this was easy to follow. Now, in terms of prototypes, what is all right, good. Now, in terms of function prototypes, let me cut this because I don't want to type this back over because it's going to be the same thing that we are doing. So you can write a function prototype, which means that above main, the only thing we're going to have is this. Some books will tell you that you leave it blank. Here now, this would now be our function prototype, which can be written in two ways. So we can have it like that with a semicolon at the end here, and below main, which is right after this one, we would got the function definition. So let's run this. It works nonetheless. So let's stop, go back to our code. So that's one way if you're writing your function prototype to the top. In other instances, now what you can have right here is int, comma, int. Let's run this again. What's happening with my internet? It didn't come up. Didn't, oh, it's here. All right, so let's run this. It works again. So what I'm showing you is that you have different ways of outlining your function. So some programmers, it all depends on style. Some programmers prefer to put the function prototype to the top, where it is that is just the function data type name and the parameters. And you can have the variable name there in the parameter, or you can just have the data type. Whichever one suits you is fine. All right, so I hope that this was informative. You can do additional reading on the topic so that you are more informed. But this is a simple way by which we can implement a function in C.